Have you ever had the feeling that you were pulled out of the routine and thrown into a void without explanation? Friends drift apart, opportunities disappear, the world seems to go on without you, and all this all of a sudden. Calm. This is not bad luck, nor punishment. What no one told you is that the universe has a very peculiar way of calling those who have a real mission. It isolates. And the most curious? This happens to all the chosen, even before they know they have been chosen. Does this idea seem absurd? So hold on, the most intense periods of solitude in your life may have actually been the most sacred moments. Because it is in silence that the soul begins to scream what routine stifled. What once seemed like a hole, can now be understood as a portal. And yes, there is a deep, powerful, and transformative explanation behind it all. The question is, are you ready to know the truth? In this video, you'll find out what no one tells you about isolation, why it's not an accident, and how this seeming emptiness is actually the greatest gift of your spiritual life. Get ready to turn a key. Because, once you understand what is behind this process, nothing will look the same anymore. There are moments in life when everything falls silent. Friends disappear, invitations cease, and even the cell phone seems to fast from notifications. For those who don't understand, this may seem like bad luck or rejection. But those who have already awakened to the call of the mission of life know, this loneliness is not punishment, it is an invitation. An invitation from the universe, made with severe affection, for the person to find their inner strength, their purpose, and start inner development with more depth. It is the moment when external noise gives way to introspection and the soul begins to whisper what the world does not allow to hear. Isolation, in these periods, is more strategic than one might think. It's not escape, it's preparation. Like the archer who retreats the arrow before launching it, life retreats those who are about to experience something great. During this time, the person can allow themselves to immerse themselves in self-knowledge, reconnect with their spiritual energy and notice the signs that previously went unnoticed. It is there that she begins to understand that loneliness is an ally in the journey of personal growth. A book like The Power of Now, by Eckhart Tolle, can be an excellent companion at these times. And it's curious how everything around seems to slow down when the soul is being called to something greater. The chosen ones, as many call them, go through this period as if they were crossing an internal desert. But it is not a dry desert, it is fertile in revelations. Each silence brings a teaching, each absence reveals a more subtle presence, that of the Spirit itself in the process of spiritual transformation. And, little by little, the person realizes that this phase has not come to punish him, but to prepare him for something that requires more light, more clarity, more spiritual alchemy than he ever imagined he needed. Want to see a practical example? Imagine someone who has always lived surrounded by people, parties, commitments. One fine day, everything empties. This person can resist, try to force connections, get distracted by social networks. Or you can accept this moment and turn inward. Meditating daily, writing an emotional journal, walking alone in the morning, these are practices that help to hear the call. It is in this choice that the process of overcoming old patterns and awakening a new version of yourself begins. This time of seclusion is not about withdrawing from the world, but about getting closer to who you really are. Like a sacred cave, solitude reveals the maps of purpose that were hidden under the dust of routine. The mission of life begins there, not when the person finds a title or a career, but when he recognizes his essence. And it is in this recognition that the next step is revealed, a deeper, more intense step, where the real work begins. It is curious how, in solitude, the soul begins to undress. Without the noise of the world, you can no longer run away from yourself. What was once masked by distractions, now presents itself clearly. What to do with these old pains, with these camouflaged traumas? Isolation reveals, but also offers the ideal stage for the spectacle of self-knowledge. It is there, on this intimate stage, that the person finds the real chance of spiritual transformation. Moments of introspection are like mirrors, only they don't reflect the face, but the past. Suddenly, old memories reappear, forgotten emotions overflow, and the journey requires courage. This phase is almost like diving into a dark sea, but, contrary to popular belief, it is where the pearls are found. When a person agrees to revisit their wounds, they begin to develop a quiet but powerful inner strength. The spiritual energy intensifies in this deep dive. Working on the interior is not just reflecting, it is also acting. Reading books like Women Who Run with the Wolves, doing conscious breathing sessions, practicing therapeutic journaling. All of this helps to open up emotional space. Because, yes, growing up hurts. But well-worked pain becomes power. And that's exactly where the differential of the chosen ones lies. They don't run away from pain, they transmute. They live a true spiritual alchemy, where each tear turns into ink to rewrite their own history. It does not have an exact manual, but it has safe paths. Energy therapies, such as Reiki or Theta healing, help to unlock old patterns. High-frequency music can calm the mind. Planting, cooking with presence, taking care of the body like a temple. All of this strengthens the spiritual connection. This type of care develops emotional and spiritual resistance. It is like sharpening a sword that will be used in future battles, internal or external. And as this inner work deepens, something begins to change in the look, in the words, in the dreams. The heart becomes lighter, but also wiser. The person feels that something is awakening within him, a call to become more than just someone searching for answers, someone ready to be answered. And, in this process, silence takes on a new tone, that of creation. Do you know that moment when the artist closes the studio door and dives into his creation? It is exactly like this with the chosen ones in the process of spiritual transformation. Isolation becomes a creative sanctuary, where the soul can paint its deepest feelings without fear of judgment. Solitude, in this context, does not oppress, it liberates. Because, when you don't have an audience, the human being can be genuinely himself. And it is there that the essence of purpose is revealed. Imagine a writer who needs to get away from the world to bring her book to life. Or a musician who spends days locked in his room until the right melody finally springs up. These are practical examples of how introspection makes room for creation. In the same way, those who are on a journey of personal growth need this time alone to compose their new version. It is an artistic process. It requires patience, surrender and very, very inner silence. This silence, by the way, is where the wounds whisper their secrets. and only those who are willing to listen to them can cure them. The inner work is like tinkering with paint, sometimes it stains, sometimes it runs, but it always transforms. The chosen ones know that each emotion is a color, and that shadows are also part of the work. Therefore, they are not afraid to face their imperfections. On the contrary, they understand that this is where the most authentic beauty lives. Many people think that isolation is a waste of time. But only those who have allowed themselves to pass through it with intention know how fertile it is. Want a simple exercise? Take a notebook and write down everything you feel for a whole day in silence. No filter, no censorship. In the end, you'll have a candid portrait of your soul in your hands, something that's worth more than gold. This is the kind of introspection that leads to awakening and true inner development. And the most fascinating thing is that, when the masterpiece begins to take shape, no one from the outside can explain how it happened. Because it is an invisible, secret, sacred process. The fruits come from the inside out, as in a snap of inspiration. And it is in this state of deep creation that the chosen ones prepare for what comes next, a challenge that requires more than inspiration, it requires discipline. Every great soul must go through trials. And it's not because the universe is cruel, no. It is because he knows that his life mission requires preparation. Just as ancient warriors trained in silence, away from the eyes of the city, the chosen ones go through a period of strategic isolation. This is the invisible training ground, where inner strength is shaped, ego is challenged, and spiritual energy is strengthened day by day. It's not comfortable, but it's necessary. In this training, life stops touching the head. He begins to test limits, put stones in the way, cause falls. But look, it's not to destroy, it's to strengthen. It's like that personal trainer who makes you squat with more weight, only here, the weight is emotional, spiritual, psychological. And if the person resists the process, he stagnates. If you embrace discipline, you evolve. This is where personal growth reveals itself as an elite training of the soul. Practical exercises for this type of training? Of course there are. Waking up early even if you don't feel like it, meditating on days of chaos, fasting from social networks, seeking silence in a noisy world. These are the daily workouts that build inner fortitude. Books like The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman can help you stay focused and remember that every internal battle won is an achievement that no one can take away. The spiritual warrior understands that the main struggle is not against the outside world, but against his own shadows. Doubt, laziness, fear, comparison, vanity, these are the monsters that present themselves in this invisible dojo. And it is facing one by one, with patience and courage, that the person becomes what he was born to be. Because mission without preparation becomes a burden. But with preparation, it becomes a legacy. And when training becomes routine, what was once pain becomes strength. Sensitivity gains precision. Intuition is sharper than a samurai sword. And in the midst of this silent battlefield, something rare, almost magical begins to emerge, the power to transform pain into wisdom. This is the beginning of true spiritual alchemy. Transform fear into light. This is the essence of spiritual alchemy. The ancient alchemists sought to turn lead into gold, the chosen ones today seek something even more valuable, to transform pain into power. This doesn't happen magically, it happens when you face what scares you head-on. That's when the person decides to stop running away from their own monsters and begins to understand that they came to teach. This is the moment when suffering becomes raw material for the awakening of consciousness. Alchemy begins in silence. When one is alone, in introspection, and something inside one whispers, "There is more." She feels that she can no longer live on the surface, that there is a life mission that pulsates, calling. And it is in this call that she begins to see meaning even in the traumas. Everything that seemed illogical takes shape. Loneliness becomes a laboratory, isolation becomes a workshop. There, she mixes courage with surrender, faith with action, and begins the most intense process of spiritual transformation she has ever experienced. But alchemy is not only done with good intentions, it takes fire. The fire of discipline, of surrender, of confrontation. It is those difficult days, when nothing seems to make sense, that most activate this transforming spiritual energy. Want a real example? People who, after bereavement, decide to change careers and help other people in pain. Or who, after years of anxiety, dives into the study of self-knowledge and becomes a therapist. This is alchemy in motion. This transformation requires delivery. It is letting the old me die so that the new one can be born. It is giving up being who pleases everyone to be who you really are. The chosen ones go through this, and it's not easy. It's scary. It makes you want to go back. But it is in this journey that a strong, centered soul is forged with a purpose that no one can take away. Books like Osho's The Awakening of a New Consciousness can be precious fuel on this journey. And as this process unfolds, the person begins to realize that something has changed forever. He no longer reacts as before, he no longer loses himself as before. There is a soft steadiness in the gaze, a spiritual protection around her. And this profound inner change begins to radiate outward, creating a field of clarity so strong that it protects against any external noise. There is something sacred about getting away from the noise. The chosen ones know this. They realize that the more they connect with their life mission, the more they need to protect themselves from outside noise. Not only the literal noise, but that invisible noise that diverts the focus, contaminates the mind and stifles the intuition. Negative news, destructive criticism, social comparisons, all these destabilize the energy field. Solitude, when well lived, is like a spiritual shield against these interferences. In this silent space, the person can distinguish what is theirs and what is a projection of others. He realizes that not every opinion deserves a response, not every vibration should be absorbed. This discernment is born of self-knowledge and introspection cultivated with affection. It's like tuning an instrument, it requires calm and listening. Want a practical tip? Set aside one day a week without social media. Use this time to reconnect with yourself, with nature, with your purpose. Spiritual protection is strengthened when a person sets clear boundaries. It is not selfishness, it is wisdom. To say no to certain invitations, environments, or people is to say yes to your spiritual energy. Occasional insulation allows you to understand what drains and what nourishes. And in this process, the inner strength expands. One learns to preserve one's peace as one who protects a treasure, because that is exactly what one is, a changing treasure. This internal shielding does not come from outside, it is not an amulet, nor an external ritual. It's posture. It is presence. It's a daily decision to stay focused on what really matters. Many confuse this with coldness, but it is actually conscious presence. A good practice to cultivate this: mindfulness meditation, reading books like The Miracle of Mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh, and walking in silence at dawn. These are simple habits that change everything. And the most interesting thing is that the more a person protects himself spiritually, the more he begins to hear clearly the whispers of the universe. New ideas arise, answers appear, paths are revealed. What was once confusing is illuminated. And so, in a silence that does not weigh but strengthens, she feels that she is ready for the next level of her journey. Now tell me, after all this, will you still treat your moments of loneliness as punishment? Or will you begin to see this silence as the highest calling your soul has ever received? The truth is that, if you have come this far, it was not for nothing. The universe does not waste time with those who do not have a mission. So the question that remains is, what are you going to do with all this that has awakened in you now? Are you going to keep ignoring the signs, pretending that you don't feel that call pulsing inside? Or will you use this knowledge as fuel to start, for real, your spiritual transformation? The path has already begun, and you know it. And look, this kind of wisdom doesn't hit twice in the same way. Either you honor what you learned here, or you will live trapped in a noise that only serves to distract you from the essentials. So, if you felt that this content touched you in any way, share it with those who need to hear it. Leave your comment below. Have you ever gone through some isolation that seemed like punishment, but then made sense? I want to know your story, really. Oh, and of course, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Because in the next videos, we will dive even deeper into this journey of awakening the chosen ones. And you won't want to miss a thing.